And welcome to this week's episode of the Growth Whisperers Podcast, where everything we do is about helping to build enduring great companies. That's something that Brad and I chat about a lot. Hey, I'm Kevin Lawrence, and I'm joined here today, as I am every week, with Brad Giles. How you doing today, Brad?
I'm doing very good today. Things are good in Perth, WA, Western Australia. We are living somewhat free, for want of a better term, and yeah, we're moving into daylight saving time this week, and the football series here are moving into the finals. So all in all, things are really good. How are you doing?
You know, I'm doing great. I'm up in a place in the Okanagan area that's probably 4 hours from Vancouver, where it's sunny and warm in wine country. It's some of the best vineyards, we believe, are the best vineyards in all of Canada are here in this valley. And yeah, it's actually great. We had our final of our national sport, hockey. The final Stanley Cup was last night, although I didn't watch it. I know that is over, and the hockey players they've been quarantined in certain cities in North America, and they've been playing there for 3 months, locked up together. And
Wow.
I would imagine today they're going home to see their families, so I'm happy for them. Yeah, and it's a great week so far. We got our team retreat this weekend, where we're working on our own strategy and that over the next 3 to 5 years, kind of resetting the long term and obviously working on the shorter term. So all in all, it's real good. So what is it that we have on today? What is our focus, our insightful discussion going to be about?
Well, we all know what core values are. Most companies, most organizations would have core values, but the question that we're talking about today is, how do you know that your core values are right? Or, as one Canadian I know has described it, correct.
That's right.
You know,
I hope you caught that. Correct, as in core values and correct. That was my stroke of genius all of 7 minutes ago. Although it may or may not. Yeah.
Welcome to the Dad Jokes channel here.
Yeah.
So we're talking about how do you know that your core values are right. It's really important because core values are a tool that are used by so many people, specifically leaders in the organization. And how do we know they're right? Just because we came up with them and just because they sound cool, how do we know they're right?
Yeah, it's a great question, Brad. And, you know, often when we go into organizations, we find they're not. And I remember one I went into, and obviously, I mean, all we do is figure out better strategy and sharper execution, better people. Those are things we do every day. And we've been doing it every day for a long time. So it's easier for us to see. So don't take this as being critical of others. It's just, are they right? And often they are not. One I went into, one of their core values was accountability. It's kind of a nice word, and they had a nice little phrase even to define. It was beautiful. Well, 3/4 in, they only accomplished half of their goals, and it was an excuse fest. Yeah. And I finally said that, hey, I love your aspirational goal here, but accountability ain't a freaking core value. If it's a core value, you're not going to have most people not delivering 3/4 in a row. So we put that on a list as the aspirational core value, but, you know, it turned out that, you know, being nice was more likely a core value, or, you know, supporting of people was a core value, or making
which
those
is
concepts.
Fine.
It is. It's just, but the key is it's know who you are and who you aren't. Right. And often, I mean, so that's one I saw that they weren't right. How about you, Brad? I'm sure you've seen a couple of examples.
I've seen many interesting ones, but let's start by saying, well, what are core values? Core values, like you said, are who we are as a shared team, right? What are the, to use Jim Collins' phrase, what are the collective beliefs that are bone deep? Okay, so they're so deeply held that they're bone deep. So I kind of like to frame that with clients. What are the shared beliefs that are bone deep? as a definition of core values, and they're not. This is the piece where sometimes we get a bit unstuck, but that's okay. They're not necessarily every single person in the organization. Okay. I've seen examples where you go and people have a very strong belief that the core values should represent every single person in the organization. Every single person. But how big is your organization? You could have 20,000 people. I mean, you are going to have a lot of different beliefs in that organization. So I like to, in the teams and the size organizations that I work with, I like to say that they represent the leaders, primarily the leadership team, and then secondarily the kind of leaders beyond that. But they represent the leaders in the organization, the beliefs they have that are bone deep, because they're the ones that make the decisions around culture. They're the ones that establish and set and hold the culture, and they're the ones that protect the culture.
So you're not saying that all of the frontline people and everyone else don't have to have them. What you're saying is it's critical that the senior leaders, middle leaders, and probably the managers have it, because they're making all of the people decisions about the rest of the humans.
Yeah, that's right. And they're the ones that have to make the behavioral, the cultural decisions. And in every single organization.
Because I thought you were going to go down a road there, Brad. You're making me a little anxious here, my friend. I thought you were going to go around the road saying, well, not everyone has to have it because that's too hard.
Not at all.
Okay,
no,
good.
No,
that's where I thought we might be having ourselves a nice little debate here. But no, you're saying it's like starting with all those leadership and management roles, because they affect everything else. And by nature, if all those leaders and managers are living those core values, they're going to have people working for them, or at least a high chance, that also live by those values.
If everybody when you're establishing what are the core values to begin with, if it has to be representational of every single person, okay, then what happens is the leaders who have to make the decisions, their beliefs get filtered or watered down. And so it's not as strongly representative of the leaders as it should be. Okay. And they're the ones that have to make the hard calls. And the hardest calls in business are the people calls, right?
Yep.
They're the ones. So
let's kind of rewind this. So what we're saying is it's a set of beliefs, or I call operating system, or beliefs that people have in common that will work well together in this company. It's an underpinning of the culture, and it's basically the beliefs or behaviors that are acceptable and not acceptable here. And in a phrase that I use with companies is it's those beliefs that make us freakishly unique. Unique. It's not about differentiation. It's about accurately capturing what makes us unique. Like we have in our firm, we have one that's called More Than You Say. And for people to be on the team, it means if you've got a job to do, you should always be looking for ways to do a little bit more. And if you believe you should always do a little bit more than you're paid and always try to just do a little bit extra, you'll fit well. And that weeds out a lot of people. There's a lot of people don't have that belief, and they would do it if you made them. It's just not in who they are. And so they would end up fighting the system. And that would not be pleasant for them. So if we go back to a set of beliefs that end up showing up in behaviors, but a set of beliefs that we have that is unique and non-negotiable here. And so it doesn't matter whether you're the CEO or the person cleaning up the parking lot at the end of the day. Those are that commonality that hold us together. One example that I use with people is it's very much like an organized religion. Organized religion is based around a common set of beliefs. And then they have, in different versions of prayers and all kinds of different faiths, those prayers actually reinforce those beliefs. And it's if you look at, the extreme of an organized religion would be called a cult. And cult is the core word or base word of culture.
Yeah.
Culture. And so cult like culture. And we're not, we want to be doing everything for good and for the betterment of others.
But do you know what? Sorry, I cut you off there. Culture comes from the Latin word colere, which means to care or cultivate. So
Excellent.
what that yeah, I've detailed that in my book, and that is why culture is so important. In when you think of it from the lens of a leader, is that if culture is about understanding, first of all, with core values and core purpose, but core values, who we are, and then our culture is there to cultivate people. Everyone will have a beginning and a middle and an end, and we need to, as leaders, cultivate them through that journey. Then we create the cult around that. I did step off onto a tangent there,
but it was a beautiful tangent. So the root of it, it's these common beliefs like an organized religion would have, or a sport team would have. It's just on a football team, it's the plays that pull you together, or the disciplines, or the chants that you do pregame, or how you call each other out. You get these beliefs which turn into behaviors and rituals that gel you together. Now, lots of companies don't have them, and it's kind of a come as you are. And if you could imagine, in the companies that we work with that build strong culture, which is underpinned by the core values, it's kind of like a themed party. It's like it's going to be a toga party, or it's black tie, or it's black and white, or it's 60s, where if you don't have it defined, it's kind of like a come as you are. And you got a couple, you got 200 people coming to a party, and they're all just doing whatever they felt inspired by in a moment. They're not good or bad. We just kind of give them a theme. It's the James Bond theme black tie party. Okay, I will bring the James Bond essence of myself to the party. Yeah, it's kind of what we're doing here with culture and core values. And I want to make the point, it's not just fluffy HR stuff. And early in my career, that's what I thought it was. Core values becomes one of the most important decision-making tools we have. Because when it comes to people, there's lots of different ways to get results. But we want people who will do it a similar way and with a similar belief system. Yeah. And if when people don't, it is a nightmare. It's hard on them and hard on the team because they have a different belief in how the job should be done or how we should treat people.
Well, let's go back to your example before about accountability. You said you work with a team. So if a core value is accountability of the CEO and owner of the business, and it's genuine, this person really believes in accountability, and then this person hires a senior executive who has no care for accountability whatsoever, that is where that problem happens that you just described. So it's not that you need to be a cool part of the team. It's like if your beliefs aren't similar, there will be friction, there will be problems. Yes. And to be a high performing team, we don't need any more problems than we already have. Yes. We need everybody on the same seat, on the same bus, going in the right direction.
Yes, and we already have enough challenges getting people focused on that right direction. The last thing is we should be arguing on whether the bus should have seats or not. Yeah. Literally, or we should have windows or not, and that's getting down into belief. So we'll take it down into tangibles. That example of the CEO hiring an executive. If the executive has a different belief system, different values, i.e. they don't care about accountability, well, that executive just potentially moved to their family, left another good job. It's not fair to the executive to bring him into an environment that he doesn't match. Yeah. Never mind, it's not fair to the business because this guy most likely is going to be a problem because these values don't really change. They're burnt in pretty deep into our ecosystems, or our internal systems, our operating systems, pardon me. Yeah. So the idea here is to be so clear about what makes us freakishly unique in the way that different religions would be clear on what their beliefs are. And then people make sure that they're in the right organization. They choose based on those beliefs. So for us, we want to bring people in who naturally fit with our beliefs. And I'll give you just a quick side note that I remember a good German friend of mine. He had a mom who was always very blunt, very strong-willed, like told it like it is, like no one I've met. She makes me feel like I'm not direct. Anyway, she was hilarious, and I always liked her. And I remember, you know, my friend and I were chatting one day, and she was talking to us about how our friends would change when we had kids. I went, okay, and I'm listening, and you know, she said, look at, you will watch how your different friends will parent their children. And there's going to be some very different beliefs about how you should handle parenting. And she said in her strong German accent, basically, you're going to end up almost having fights with some of your friends about parenting styles, or such strong disagreements, you will not hang out with them anymore.
Yeah.
And that's like a values piece. Your values and the way you look at it shows up in parenting. It's, look at, the kids generally all end up okay. But we have different preferences. So anyway, all of this to say, this core values, and you know, we both get passionate about it because it gets in the way, is that we want to stack the team with people who have similar values, because it makes the business work better. And, you know, and in many ways, we want the culture to be as strong as it is within different religions, as an example. This is not about religion, just they have a model that has a very good cultural reinforcement, a bunch of mechanisms. So it's easy for the team just to get about their work and eliminating a lot of the interpersonal issues or disagreements about how to treat people.
I remember a client that I started working with years ago, and we were in the discovery phase. So we had a series of meetings beforehand, and I said, so tell me about your core values. Do you have any, number one? And if you do, what are they? And how did you come about having them? How did you come about getting them? And he said, well, yeah, we're pretty proud. We engaged a firm a few years ago. They kind of came in and they said, we'll build your core values for you. And they went out and they interviewed everybody in the organization. And I'm like, okay. And I said, so what are they? And the CEO and owner of the business couldn't remember. He remembered one or two, but he couldn't remember. I think they had 5 or 6. He couldn't remember them all. I'm like, okay. So if you can't remember them, and this is, I kind of paused. I was like, I'm not going to go down that path too far. But if you can't remember them, do you think any of the leadership team can remember them? And he says, no, probably not. That's probably why we need to get you to help us, Brad. Okay. And so longer story short, we went down that path. And then, of course, I went in and we started working together. And none of the leadership knew what they were, but even more importantly, none of the leadership team believed in them. They were just that there was two bad things at play. Number one, it was built from a survey of all of the staff, which is just
horrible strategy. That's a popularity contest, and it never works.
Yeah. And number two, it was the cool things. Like they were looking for the cool words. Like I'm just going to say play as a team, not saying that that's a bad value.
And I bet you they had innovation in there somewhere, because that's a really cool value to have.
It was stuff like that, right?
I know. We've seen it. And yeah, we're not.
And so I'll close out this story quickly. So we started from scratch, and I said, look, are here's a couple of simple tests. Would you fire someone because they breached these core values? And the look of horror on some of the leadership team members, I'll never forget. They were like, no, it's not what this is for. That's not what. And I'm going, okay.
This is our be cool and feel good list. This is not like serious stuff. That's what I know.
Yeah. And okay, well, what about, would you take financial hit or to maintain the integrity of the core values? Like, would you not do a deal or would you not do a sale? Okay, they were not sure on that one. And then is it alive? Is it aspirational? No, they were not sure on that one either. They said, no, this is who we want to be. Like this. And I'm going, well, this is definitely not what core values are. So we start from scratch.
Sounds like they hired a marketing firm, my friend. And that's generally what I have seen. There are marketing kinds of firms or people who do this that aren't trying to tap into the core DNA of the organization, like plug right into the brainstem.
Yeah.
They're just trying to come up with cool stuff. Brad, I cannot tell you, when I have a new client approach our firm and we talk to them and we look at their core values, I can usually tell by reading them, without even talking to them. But sometimes they actually might look good, and I always do a couple acid tests. And my question is, so how attached are you to these values? Because sometimes they're already burnt in, and it's kind of too late, and it's in the culture, and people do believe them. And even though it doesn't meet our higher fire standard, like they're there and alive. So sometimes I've had to leave values that are, not quite there alone. And many other times we got to rework them. And you got to be very gentle because of the amount of work that went into it, and it's sensitive. But so it happens all the time. I'll share one more example and then we'll talk into how do you know?
Yeah.
So I had one client, and awesome guy, still work with him today. Love the guy. And I'm traveled to go work with him and his team, and I'm in his head office, and we're walking up the stairs. He goes, yeah, and hey, here's our core values right here. There was 12 of them.
Oh, no.
And I looked at him and I said, that's one of the things that we'll be chatting about. And we ended up redoing them, and now he's got the revised 5 up there. And we did a program to help change that. But you'll see, and I've seen your amazing picture that you have with that.
So there's a company in Australia a listed company, one that will remain unnamed, and I've got a photo of their...
Protect the innocent, yeah.
I've got a photo of their boardroom where they've got 22 core values, all listed up on this fantastic poster, but it's got more words than you know what to do with. And the problem with having 22 core values is that they're just values. They're not core values. It's like, this is every value that could ever be listed. And it's like you said, it's either a marketing team or an overzealous HR person or something like that. You can't
a well-intentioned person. Yeah, well-intentioned who actually, but just doesn't understand. Like, it's like developing core values is, it's generally it's science. It's not art. A little tiny bit of art in it, but they're a very specific thing, which means there's a number of different processes to get there. But if you don't truly understand them and the ramifications, you're going to make that kind of stuff. And if you have 22, you got none. I wonder, Brad, like for their salespeople, do they have like 22 first places in their sales contests? Do they have like 22 people that are the employee of the month or the employee of the year? Like, if you're going to do 22, you might as well do none, right? Because you're just putting crap into the system and congesting the system. And
But I would love to walk into that room and say, oh, imagine if someone asked you, rather than 22, they just said, like, imagine if someone asked you to just have 5 to 7. Which 5 to 7 would you pick? And I reckon that leadership team would say,
They know.
Yeah, of course they do. They'd say, oh yeah, definitely. Well, it would definitely be that one and that one and that one. And they, in about 15 seconds, you'd be able to go, oh, so these are the real core values. This is just a nice poster.
Which is what we've had to do, and we did in that other company. So rule number 1, how do you know if your core values are right? Number 1 is you don't have 22 of them. Actually, you have somewhere between 3 to 5, right?
I would say 5 to 7, but
I would strongly disagree, and I would probably be right.
Go on.
If you get to the core must have, And if you can't live them, you lose your job. I have generally found 3 to 5. And I think there's this guy named Jim Collins. I think he said the same thing.
And I think there's this guy called Jim Collins, and I think he said the same thing as well in 5 to 7. One of us.
Okay, you know what we got to do now tonight in North America is there's this country called the United States of America, and they're having a debate tonight between the two presidential candidates. One of them, who is this term came up with was developed called alternate facts. So Brad, one of us is like we're having our own little mini version of it. One of us is using alternate facts tonight. And we can get a team of reporters to fact check us to figure out who is being extra creative. Anyway, I don't think the root of it is
it's not one.
It's not
and
one.
It's not 22.
No, and the ideal that I aim for is 3 to 5. Brad will go up to 7. Right or wrong, as long as your team gets on it and has a core list that you agree that if you're going to be in this company, you must have it. And if you violate, and the rule of thumb I would also use on top of this is that if you go and get your executive team, your leadership team, your managers, and you self-rate yourselves on a scale of 0 to 10, how much do you live these values? Almost all of your best people in that group will be at least an 8.5 out of 10 on every single one.
Yeah.
Right. They would rate, and I mean, some people are hard on themselves and they might underrate themselves, but truly if, the managers went and talked about them, your top people would be at least 85% on every single one. Because it's not about perfection. There is a tolerance, but it's in their DNA.
So if you were to start a new organization, would this core value be carried forward into that organization? That's one of the questions that I'd like to ask people.
Great question. Yep.
Yeah. Would
the
or
other way
is it just our industry?
Yeah, because this is the piece I want to get to is core values are human beliefs. Human beliefs. It's not company strategy, right? So when I see things like, we're innovative in a core value, which normally won't make it past my BS filter. Okay, great. So you want every single human in the company has to be innovative or they get fired. Well, I don't know about that. Well, what about, if you got your bookkeeper who's been doing that job for 10 years and every day they're supposed to have their blinders on and making sure everything is accurate. Do they need to be innovative? Well, not really. Okay. How about the janitor? Do they need, well, okay. Well, then it ain't a core value. It's a nice thing. This is and you got to be careful because a lot of times these attributes, again, they either skew towards the extroverts in the company sometimes because it's extroverts normally developing them. So it's got to work for the introverts or the technical people too, and they have to be held to the same standards. Secondly, sometimes it starts going into company strategy, right? Yep. And so
or smack recipe.
Let's say exactly, or smack recipe, a la Jim Collins. So it's basically getting back to what do these human attributes, and would you take it into another company? Would you apply the same thing for the people? Would you apply the same filters for the people that you had to come and spend a weekend with you and your family? Things like that. But it's human attributes, not company strategy. And second on this is it applies to introverts and extroverts. How else do you know you have them? And historically, you have fired high performers who don't live them. And the reason you fired them would violate one of these.
Well, is it don't live? So I would have a slightly different take on this one, and that is if they breach them. So it's one thing, because some core values you need to live, but other core values, it's simply a case of this is what we believe, and it can be, and the breach is the problems, or actively working against it. So there's a couple of different ways to think about it. But if someone is...
So what's your distinction between live and breach? I want to explain that. I think we're saying the same thing,
so
but
I
like this breach. I like this breach idea. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm going to go back to innovation. So there's one company that I work with, and I'm going to say that if they're not the most innovative in their global industry, they'd have to be in the top 3. They are engineering. They're amazing what they do with engineering. They just are beautiful at the research and development area, and they when you look at like what the CEO does. The other day, the CEO's son, okay, who is like 3 or 4 years old, was on YouTube building paper aeroplanes that have a paper turning motor.
Wow.
Right? It was something crazy like that. And he's like 3 or 4. Like, these people are next level engineering, next level thinking. And everything, like you look at their car, their house, their farm, everything is all about. So these people deeply believe in innovation. Like, it's so bone deep. Now, if you are the accountant in that organization, and you don't need to be necessarily innovative in that role, okay? But you've got to respect that that's the organization. So you're not going to be fired if you're an accountant and you're not innovative. But
I got it.
If you're actively working against it, if you're breaching it, then that's,
I got it.
Then that's grounds.
I think we're saying the same thing. We'll take a simpler example. One of my clients has a core value, 2 of them. One is the importance of family, and the other is to elevate people or elevate others.
Yeah.
So if you were an accountant and you wouldn't get fired because around the importance of family, you didn't organize a family rally, or you didn't do this. But if you were blocking people from important family events and not allowing your team members to go to this child's school play, you would. So I like your distinction, Brad. Yeah, it's like, because you can't live the importance of family. You can't be living it every day in every way, but it's really obvious if you violate it. And that's what you're talking about.
Yeah. If you're actively working against it consciously.
You're doing something that's against it. And like elevating others, it doesn't mean that you need to be positive and holding other people up all day. But if you're diminishing others or doing something to take the wind out of somebody's sails, now we got a problem. I agree. So the distinction is, to just unpack that a bit, is it's the difference between being a role model of living it versus basically going against that in the organization.
That's exactly,
and there will be
people,
exactly
right.
Generally the extroverts, who are often role models or loudspeakers for some of these values. Yeah. That's a great way of looking at it. Awesome. So
I've got one other.
Yeah.
I've got one other. Imagine you're the CEO. Imagine you're the CEO, and then one of your leadership team walks into your office one day, and they says, "You're not going to believe it. I've got great, fantastic news. Last week, my partner and I won the lottery, and we're off tomorrow on a world trip. This is the best news." And you're like, "Oh, this is not good at all." But the point is, if you were that executive, would that executive continue to live the core values? So if you got more than enough money, the actual question is, if you had more than enough money to live for the rest of your life, then
would you still live by those? Right.
Would you continue to maintain that core value of innovation or elevate others, the one that you just mentioned, or whatever it is?
Right. So is it who you are or a mask you're putting on, basically? Because if you got all that money, that's a great one. The other one I mentioned is that have you fired people because they have, or would you fire someone because they violated it? You might not have, because you might be super nice and, a little more tolerant, or you might not have had to. The other one is that, and we do this with our companies, we do quarterly surveys of executive and often leadership. And we ask people blatantly, tell us about something that someone did great. We call it a win or a brag, and the core value they lived. And the damn words show up in the survey. So the density of the language in the survey tells me how real that is, because if those core values are alive and being reinforced, they need reinforcement. It shows up in the language like crazy, and almost as often as the core value gets repeated is usually the most frequently repeated one is often the strongest one, or the one that's being lived most at that point. So it's that's one angle. We have another angle where we get people to share 3 words to describe the company's culture. And the 3, and we do a word cloud. The most commonly repeated words usually should have a strong correlation to your core values. Yeah. And heck, if your core values are really strong, they're going to show up in that word cloud. So
what you're doing is you're just drawing from a person's subconscious what they are thinking about when it comes to the culture.
Correct.
So it's just another lens to look at the potential ways that core values could emerge or be discovered.
It is, and there's many more. The key is that we have these things sharp as tools to help us. Another couple things that we look at if it's real is that in whatever process you're using for interviewing people, you're going to have direct or indirect questions there that assess their core values. It's going to be in there. Yeah. On the flip side, once they're hired, we have our own unique approach to 360s. It's a very succinct but deep process. And we directly survey people on the core values. We get them to self-assess, and we get others to assess. And I remember one of them that we did, it's on a 10 scale, 0 to 10. And one of the leaders had 6s on 4 of the core values. So, and they were an executive. So I contacted the CEO and said, hey, we need to have a chat. So-and-so, based on peer ratings, is in the category of what the heck are they doing in the building? And we need to address this. And, the CEO gave the person, most CEOs work with are compassionate and want to give people a chance. They gave the person a chance, but didn't make a difference. But, but even having it in their 360s, which is a great tool to help leaders get some, real feedback to grow, it helps them because it lets them see what's really going on. And if because sometimes you got good people, they just need to recalibrate. Like they don't know, and they need a bit of direction. So Brad, we probably got another dozen. So let's do 1 or 2, and then let's start wrapping up here. 1 or 2 other ideas to know if your core values are real.
So here's the question that I find from all leadership teams that I work with, all the times I've done it, it creates the most challenge or the most contention. Would you continue to hold this core value if it become a competitive disadvantage? So
yes.
In the market, if the environment changed and that meant that our organization is going to be penalized for holding this core value, would you continue to hold it?
Yep.
And that's where your comment about the mask 5 minutes ago really comes into it, because then we're saying, well, is it really, really core, or is it just, this is what needs to be core? And I've had some great debates around that one.
The key that we're trying to get to here for everyone is to really evaluate it. At the end of the day, if you had 100 high-performing people to hire for a role, and you knew they could all do the job great. In theory, if you would just be able to apply your core values, and the ones with the highest ratings on the core values would be the best fit, assuming that the performance was already there, which is a little bit hypothetical. But that's really what you're looking for. And if you look back in your career, the people that you've enjoyed working with the most often have very similar core values if it's been for a number of years. Your friends, taking my good German friends, mom, around the parenting thing, your friends that you spend the most time with have similar core values, because it makes it easy, because you generally have a different view or a similar view of the world. That's what makes it work well and have a lot less friction, because at the end of the day, if you've got someone at the other end of the spectrum and how they believe things should be, it's difficult, which is why I've noticed that the firms I work with, I have to be careful. I try not to share my core values because I don't want to influence them with the words, because they're usually really similar. The way this world works is I notice almost all of my clients, 90% of them have very similar values.
But that's not because you have led them to that.
Nope.
And I observe something similar. Like I'm very, very, very particular in the method that I use to make sure that I'm using their words and I'm not polluting the well. So let's move to wrap up. So what are the kind of few takeaways that we get when we ask the question, how do we know that your core values are right? What are your thoughts?
Just do a real acid test. And, when we would recommend, first suggestion is get your leaders, your top 10, 20 people in your company to do some sort of a self-assessment exercise. And this is a great thing that we've done before with teams. Get them to rate themselves 0 to 10 on each of the values. And then secondly, how could they individually live the values better? It's almost like a little bit of a tune-up or a little calibration. And then part B, as a company, how could we live those values better? Because if we don't define the culture, it just goes back, if we don't say it's a James Bond themed party, it just goes back to kind of come as you are in terms of behaviors.
Yeah.
And then the final thing is to make a list of tough decisions that you should explore based on things that don't fit your core values. It could be a process. It could be people. It could be partners. It could be customers. But make a list of tough decisions you should explore. And by the way, there's some organizations who've done an amazing job around this. In the US, there's organizations that did a great job around it with things like cigarettes and other things, like large companies that cut off big portions of their sales because of this. So something to think about. Any final thoughts from you, Brad?
Look, there's people say it's hard to manage people. I think it's pretty easy. You've got the performance and you've got the core values or the cultural alignment or what people are doing there. This is so important because one of the hardest things that we do is manage people. So I think that it's critical. You've got to get it right.
Yep. And it's a lot less work to manage people who have matching belief systems because you're more in sync naturally. Awesome. Well, hey, thanks for listening. This has been the amazing Growth Whisperers. I don't want to be the damn good Growth Whisperers, always trying to get better. And with Brad, and I'm Kevin. And so if you like the video version, just go to youtube.com and look up Growth Whisperers. And for Brad, evolutionpartners.com.au. And for myself, lawrenceandco.com. So hope your values are intact and looking for ways for you to make them stronger and make them a better tool, so you can have an enduring, great company. Have an awesome week. See you soon.
See ya.